I don't know about you, but I have made a bunch of foolish decisions in my life. One of my greatest was investing in real estate in like 2007, right before the bust, top of the market. Unbelievable. We do this all the time. We make wise and foolish decisions. And here at the close of this series of Christ consciousness from the Sermon on the Mount, it's all about choosing to be wise or choosing to be foolish. Hey, my name's Paul Evans. I'm a student of Scripture and the Bible and been that for almost 50 years, just sharing some thoughts about Christ consciousness, about spirituality to help us make it through each day on solid ground rather than making these foolish decisions. Maybe today we can figure out some ways to make some wise decisions. If you hadn't already, subscribe to this channel and go to 1010life.com and sign up for the newsletter. All right, well, let's conclude these amazing teachings from the Christ from the Sermon on the Mount. Verse 24 of chapter 7 says, "Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on a rock." The big key is putting them into practice. And in many of our worlds that practice spirituality, we talk about not only setting an intention, but then integrating it. Integration. He's saying when you put these into practice, you're integrating these teachings into your life. You're not simply contemplating them, you're integrating them. And that's a big, big key, because it's easy to sit around and be philosophical and to think spiritual thoughts and to meditate, but to actually activate it, to get out and live it, that's a totally different thing, right? It's pretty easy to sit around thinking about all these things, but living them out is a different story. We've got to understand these. We've got to build life on these so that our life becomes a lot more stable than shifting. If you ever feel like your life is out of control, it could be that because you're focusing on a lot of things mentally, but physically these things aren't showing up in life. And I know that that's true in my life. When I get in my head about thoughts, reactions, but I'm not actually living it out, I'm staying internal instead of getting external, it makes a big difference. So integration's a big piece. So he says, whoever hears these words and puts them into practice is like the wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall because it had the foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. The rains came down, the streams rose, the winds blew, beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. Some of you have sung that song if you were raised going to church. A foolish man built his house upon the sand, and the rains came tumbling down. And we've got this image that may not be completely accurate, because when we think about the difference in building on the rock and building on the sand, there is a difference here. The rock is basically the cliffside. The sand is basically what they call a wadi, and that's a valley. This is not sand by the seashore. Most of us would know, hey, you don't build anything at the seashore. You should know better. You should know better than to build that at the seashore. You know that's going to get demolished. However, building in a wadi, building in a valley between two mountains seems to be safe. It seems to be serene. If it's not rainy season, it seems like a great fit. But during rainy season, the wadis, the sediment gets washed away. It looked like a great place to build. It turns out that it wasn't. So building on the rock, the wise builder, the foundation represents strong, immovable aspects of this teaching. It symbolizes a life that's grounded in consciousness and connected to source. Grounded in consciousness and connected to source, so that I've got some very stabilizing aspects in my life that I hopefully am living in, but if I'm not, I can return to. I know that they're solid. It's also about endurance. It's going to last a long time. So in one sense, we've got things in our life that are very temporary, very shifting, and other things that are supposed to be stabilizer. Love, joy, and peace should be stabilizing, should be constants in our life, should be what we are focused on and what we're anchored in. It speaks to stability and security that comes from living according to lasting, proven truths over time. Not the latest trend, not the latest exciting thought, but instead, when you look over the course of humanity, you go, what? You know what? People who were anchored in these elements, these beliefs, these traits, these characteristics, these integrity practices, they're the ones that were able to make it through with, let's say, the least suffering, but the most joy, most love, and most peace. Wisdom, the wise builder not only hears the teaching and practices them, but it comes from aligning to the consciousness and experiencing it in real time. Aligning to the consciousness and experiencing it, living it out. Again, not simply thinking about it. It's got long-term success. It is something that requires not just the thought, but the effort of application. So this is the wise builder. They survey the scene. They see the cliffside. They know if I build on that cliff, that I'm going to be a lot more stable when the storms come. Now, it's tougher to get materials up there. It's tougher to grade it to make sure that it's even. It's a lot easier to work in the wadi because it's easier to manipulate the area. It's not true when it comes to building on the rock. And that's something that we need to consider and think about, is to realize it is going to take effort. I talk a lot with my friends about doing the work. And it's a common term in therapy, right? You got to do the work. You can't simply come in here and talk. You've got to take these resources and these tools, get out in the real world and apply them and allow them to live, to come to life. So that when something happens, it doesn't just happen to us, but we stop, we think, we consider, we return to the tools, we ask the difficult questions, we do the work. And that's what building on the foundation is. It's doing the work. Then building on the sand or building in the wadi. It's unstable. It's unreliable. It signifies living a life based on shaky values, superficial beliefs, rather than deep, enduring soul beliefs. See, if I'm building on myself, on what I've been programmed to believe, on what culture has taught me, these things shift all the time. The storm comes into that, we just get washed away. On the other hand, if we're not focused on that, but we are focused on the wise building, it makes the rock building, it makes a totally different impact when the storms come, because we stand strong. We're vulnerable when we build on the sand. The storms can come and destroy. It reveals the ground for what it is. And that's a pretty big lesson to me, because there have been so many things in my life that I thought, well, I'm right about this. And I've got this teaching down. I've got this truth. And then life comes and hits, and all of a sudden I'm like, where am I? I'm lost. I don't feel secure. We're vulnerable when building in that wadi, when building in that sand, where we've taken the time and the effort to make sure the foundation is solid. It's totally different. It's a lot of work, but it's totally different. Foolishness. The foolish builder hears the teachings, but does not put them into practice. They may acknowledge the truth, but fail to examine it and apply it to their lives. There are a lot of things out there that sound really good, that are very attractional. And it's easy to sit in those things and even meditate on those things. And yet when it comes to the storm of life, you suddenly find out, man, that just didn't work. See, it needs to be tested. It needs to be tested. Not just our beliefs in our mind, but it's tested in our life, and it makes a difference. And it's longer term thinking. I'm not just trying to figure out something that allows me to survive in this moment, though that's valuable. I'm trying to find things that are going to allow me to go the rest of my life with stability and live in that constant love, joy, and peace regardless of the circumstances. On the sunny day, on the stormy day, there should be that stability, right? And that's what he's saying at the conclusion of all these teachings, that it's supposed to be about being firm. It doesn't mean that we're going to be perfect. It doesn't mean that we don't have problems. The storms come on the wise builder and the foolish builder. The impact of the storm is what the difference is. So at the end of this section of the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5 through 7, it says, when Jesus finished these sayings, the crowds were amazed at his teaching because he taught as one who had authority and not as their teachers of the law. One with authority. This goes all the way back to one of the first couple of episodes when he did teach with authority. And in that day, you had to receive authority. You didn't get to assume authority. Everybody taught the same thing that their rabbi taught. You didn't come up with anything new. You didn't go and create your own ideas. You would only repeat and teach what you learned from your rabbi. The Christ is out there teaching things they hadn't heard. He taught as one with authority. In other words, as the authority. Why? Because he was conscious. He was plugged into source. He was plugged into the spiritual knowledge, the soul knowledge. Some would say the quantum field. He was not plugged into the ideas and concepts of mankind that they came up with and sounded good. He taught as one with authority. Remember at the very beginning when we started this study, it says that he said, I did not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. I did not come to live as if the law did not matter. I came to show the correct interpretation of the law through my life. That is true consciousness. And that is building on the solid rock. Let's live out that consciousness. This consciousness of Christ that we've been studying about is not simply to figure out what the rule is and hope that we can be obedient, hope that we're good enough, but instead to live with this consciousness of Christ so that love, joy, and peace flows through our actions, flows through our words, flows into every encounter that we have. Be blessed.